I've done my best in this job, and I think I've left Arizona better than I found it. There's a lot of things that I could point to each year that I think have improved the state and allowed people to really climb the economic ladder and live their version of the American dream.
Republican Governor Doug Ducey is wrapping up 8 years in office. That is the longest tenure for an Arizona governor in 36 years since Democrat Bruce Babbitt left office. The state was emerging from the Great Recession when Ducey took office in 2015. Today, Arizona is in a much different and better place. We'll discuss Doug Ducey's legacy and the top stories of 2022 with our political insiders, Christine Jones, former Republican candidate for governor, and Tony Connie, a former Biden campaign official here in Arizona and former campaign manager for Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego. Welcome back to Square Off. Good to see you both.
Good morning.
Christine, full disclosure, you ran against Doug Ducey in a crowded primary, Republican primary for governor back in 2014.
That's right.
So that's on the table. Legacies are often best judged perhaps in a few years versus days before the governor leaves office. But I'll ask both of you, starting with you, Christine, to give me a word that you think, a word or phrase that describes Doug Ducey's tenure.
I think generally successful. I've heard other people say definitively adequate. That has a little bit of a sense of shade to me.
Definitively adequate.
So I would say successful.
Successful. Tony Connie.
I would say extremism, in the sense that there's been a huge rise of extremism in the Republican Party over the course of his 8 years. And, you know, I think he's played a part in it, and he's also been pretty silent as this stuff has come up. And so I think that when time passes, that's going to be the thing people remember.
Extremism?
Yeah, absolutely.
On Doug Ducey's part?
No, just the fact that he sort of, you know, he fundraised for some of the most extremist people in the state legislature, like Wendy Rogers, just so he can get his agenda passed. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about that he got done, it got done at the expense of having some people in office who are now national figures in some of the worst things that are happening in the country.
Okay, let's talk about some of those things. I made up but turned into a long list. So let's look at these defining events during Doug Ducey's tenure. He took office when the state had a huge budget deficit. He leaves with a large surplus and a revived economy. He pushed through the largest tax cut in state history. Education was a focal point. Under Ducey, Arizona enacted the country's first universal school voucher expansion. Every student can get $7,000 to attend a private or parochial school. But Ducey failed to lift a cap on public school spending that could lead to budget cuts and layoffs next year. And this is often forgotten, seems like years ago, a historic teacher strike in 2018. Remember that? Forced Ducey to come up with a plan to boost teacher pay. Ducey's handling of the COVID pandemic left Arizona with the third highest death rate in the country, after Mississippi and Oklahoma. Not states you want to be mentioned with. On the border, Ducey signed Donald Trump's fence in Yuma when it was done. In the last few months, he's stacked shipping containers on the border as he's leaving office. The feds have sued to remove them. The backdrop for that, of course, a historic, uncontrolled surge of migrants at the southwest border. That is one of the top stories of 2022. And yet, for all that, Ducey couldn't win a Republican primary today, and he failed to keep the governor's office in Republican hands. I'll let you, which of those achievements, moments do you want to latch on to in assessing Doug Ducey's tenure?
I think if you're the governor, you want to say there were 500,000 jobs created while I was here, and the state is in a much better economic position. The rainy day fund has been reestablished. You know, there are things that he's going to want to point to. Of the things you mentioned, I think there is an opportunity to say we couldn't rely on the federal government to do something at the border. We had to take matters into our own hands. And even though that remains in litigation today, it seems to be somewhat successful, right? On the teachers, we were able to get teachers additional pay, despite the fact that they had to march down Washington Avenue, kind of from your studio to the Capitol.
Ducey was offering them 1%.
1%.
Maybe it was 2
at the time,
1 or 2%,
right?
yeah.
And Red for Ed, right? That's going to be a part of the legacy.
Yeah.
But generally, I think the fact that even with Tony's extremism, the governor was able to maintain the majorities in the legislature and get the policy done that he kind of promised that he would do, even when I was running against him way back in 2014.
I remember 2014, we had a forum with all the candidates. You were there, and he laid out his plan to cut taxes, the tax rate, as close to zero as possible.
That's right.
and he's gotten pretty close.
Pretty close.
Tony, your assessment, pick out any one of that basket of achievements highlights.
I think the teacher strike and the education stuff is very, very important. And when I'm looking at Doug Ducey, I think it's easy to sort of see a pattern where he will go to bat for the wealthiest people in the state. That's what the tax cut was all about. That's what a lot of his policies were about. But when it comes to sort of improving teacher pay or providing support for these schools, you know, the vouchers too. That's a thing that I think we're going to see in the next years. We're going to know whether or not those vouchers were actually used in the way that the proponents have promised. And I think the data is going to come out, and we're going to see that, no, it's largely wealthier people who are already in private schools. And so I do think that his work for the people who already had a lot, that's going to be the thing, and then a lot of the neglect for those that needed
It seems like
his help.
The tax cuts and the vouchers are best viewed in the kind of longer range mirror of 2 to maybe even 5 years out to see their real impact. Another big story of 2022, the midterms. Democrats swept the state's top offices during the midterms. What's the takeaway from this election?
Well, we didn't see the red tsunami that we were hoping for. And in Arizona, there have been opportunities over time, over the last couple of decades, where the leadership, whether it was the governor or the kind of the highest ranking member, whether it was the senator or whoever, kind of took over the party. And that's one thing that Doug didn't do. He left the party to the party chairman, and the party chairman's only job, really, when you get down to it, is to elect Republicans, and they failed at that. So I think that will be a little bit of a chink in his armor.
Arizona had more election deniers on the statewide ballot than any state in the country. They all went down. Is this the end of Trumpism in Arizona?
Well, I think what's going to happen is people are going to be like, I think we're going to throw Trump away, but the ideas are not going to go away among the more extreme people that are running the Republican Party. And so, you know, we're in the belly of the beast. And I think one of the things that happened was with the audit, voters in Arizona became very, very familiar with this type of extremism. And so there wasn't as much of a need to sort of explain to the voters what they were facing. And I think that's part of the reason why we swept.
Okay, I'm going to check off a couple issues because we're running low on time. The Supreme Court throwing out the Roe versus Wade decision. That's still up in the air to be decided by Arizona courts on exactly what the abortion law is in Arizona. Also, inflation and the cost of housing. Boy, that's a big issue that somebody's going to have to get their arms around in the new year because too many people cannot afford to live here. It's a real challenge. Do you want to take a moment to look back on one of the stories we followed almost this entire year? And last week, that story came to a feel-good conclusion. After 10 months behind bars in a Russian jail and a 9-year sentence to a labor camp, Phoenix Mercury star Brittany Griner finally returned to the United States. Felt like a win for everyone following the story, but no one more so than Brittany's wife, Sherelle.
So over the last 9 months, you all have been so privy to one of the darkest moments of my life. And so today I'm just standing here overwhelmed with emotions, but the most important emotion that I have right now is just sincere gratitude.
When we come back, why